The Atlantic Ocean, deep, dark, unforgiving, it held secrets, terrible secrets. On this night it whispered one. A story of Flight 447. Scattered across miles of ocean, the wreckage was a jigsaw puzzle of horror, twisted metal, broken bodies, a scene from a nightmare. But this wasn't a dream, this was a tragedy, and it was about to get stranger. The black boxes, finally recovered, promised answers. Every airline passenger is but a name on a list, a name on a ticket, a name on a manifest. On Flight 447, 228 souls boarded. 228 names, no more, no less. At least that's what the records said. The official passenger manifest was a testament to the mundane. Names, dates, destinations, each line representing a life. A journey cut tragically short. But as investigators meticulously reviewed this document, a chill snaked down their spines. Something wasn't right. One name, one extra name, an impossible name. "228 souls boarded Flight 447, but 229 bodies were recovered. One body too many. One passenger unaccounted for. Anomaly. Impossible. Terrifying. The extra body was not listed on the manifest. No name, no ticket, no identity. A John Doe in the most unsettling sense. The mystery of the final passenger deepened. The world's best were called in. Aviation experts, forensic specialists, the best minds in their fields, tasked with solving an impossible equation. Their mission, unravel the secrets of Flight 447, find the truth behind the final passenger. But the truth, as they would soon discover, was a slippery thing. The crash site, a watery grave miles beneath the surface, yielded its secrets slowly, painstakingly. Each piece of wreckage, each data fragment, a clue in a macabre puzzle. The black boxes, voices from the past, held the key to understanding those final horrifying moments. What went wrong? What caused this catastrophic descent from the sky? The pressure mounted. The world watched, waited, demanded answers. But the answers, it seemed, were lost in the depths of the Atlantic. The black boxes, finally deciphered, painted a terrifying picture of chaos and confusion in the cockpit. Alarms blared, instruments malfunctioned. The pilots, their voices strained, fought desperately to regain control of the doomed aircraft. But something was wrong. The data revealed a chilling possibility. The autopilot, the plane's electronic brain, had inexplicably disengaged. Manual control became a desperate battle against the unforgiving forces of gravity. The investigation took a sinister turn. Fear. It seeped into the investigation like a cold fog. Whispers of the unknown, the unexplainable, the possibility that some forces are beyond human comprehension. The investigators, trained to rely on logic and evidence, found their beliefs shaken. The extra passenger became a symbol of this creeping dread, a ghost in the machine, a glitch in the matrix, a chilling reminder that some mysteries defy explanation. The media, sensing a story too big, too terrifying to ignore, descended upon the investigation like vultures. The line between fact and fiction blurred. The world held its breath, caught in the grip of a mystery that seemed to reach out from the grave. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through grimy windows. The air, thick with the smell of aged paper and forgotten things, hung heavy in the room. The investigators, their faces drawn and weary, sifted through the archives. Searching, always searching. Decades-old files, their edges brittle with time, whispered secrets long forgotten, cold cases, unsolved mysteries, ghosts of the past. The investigators, their eyes scanning lines of faded ink, were looking for a connection. A file, tucked away in a forgotten corner, called out to them. Its cover, faded and worn, bore a single word: vanished. Inside, a photograph, its edges softened with age, showed a young man with haunted eyes and a nervous smile. The man in the photo, they soon learned, was Edward Torrance, a brilliant but troubled scientist who disappeared without a trace 40 years prior. His disappearance, shrouded in rumors of radical experiments and government cover-ups, had never been solved. The investigators studied the photograph, their eyes drawn to the fear that flickered in Torrance's eyes. Was it their imagination, or did he bear a striking resemblance to the unidentified passenger from Flight 447? The resemblance was uncanny. The investigators dug deeper into Edward Torrance's past, piecing together fragments of a life lived on the edge of scientific innovation and moral ambiguity. His research, once dismissed as the ravings of a madman, now seemed eerily prescient. Torrance, they discovered, had been obsessed with the nature of time, with the possibility of bending it, of manipulating it. Notes scribbled in a frantic hand spoke of temporal anomalies, of doorways between moments in time, of the possibility of traveling not through space, but through time itself. The investigators, their skepticism giving way to a growing sense of unease, began to see the connections. Could Torrance have succeeded? Could he have found a way to bridge the gap between past and present? The implications were staggering. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered across time and circumstance, were starting to come together. The official report on Torrance's disappearance was frustratingly vague. He had simply vanished, leaving behind his research, his belongings, his life. The authorities, citing lack of evidence, had closed the case, but rumors persisted. Whispers of government involvement, of experiments gone wrong, of things best left unspoken. The investigators, their instincts screaming that there was more to the story, tracked down former colleagues and acquaintances of Torrance. Each interview painted a picture of a man both brilliant and reckless, a man driven by a thirst for knowledge that bordered on obsession, a man who would stop at nothing to unlock the secrets of the universe, even if it meant crossing lines he shouldn't. One interview, with a former lab assistant of Torrance's, sent chills down their spines. Deep in the Nevada desert, hidden from prying eyes and satellite surveillance, lay a facility, a place of secrets. A place where the lines between science and nightmare blurred. A place known only by a codename. Project Looking Glass. The investigators, following a trail of cryptic clues and redacted documents, had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something terrifying. Evidence of a clandestine government program investigating the very edges of reality. A program with ties to Edward Torrance and his research into temporal manipulation. Project Looking Glass, they discovered, was obsessed with the concept of time travel. Logs recovered from the facility detailed experiments of breathtaking audacity and chilling disregard for the sanctity of time. Human subjects, their minds conditioned and bodies wired with experimental technology, were used as guinea pigs in an attempt to breach the barriers of time itself. The logs spoke of successes and failures, of subjects sent hurtling through time, their minds and bodies ravaged by the experience. Some returned changed, their memories fractured, their grip on reality tenuous at best. Others vanished without a trace, lost in the labyrinth of time, their fates unknown. One entry in particular sent shivers down the investigators' spines. It described an experiment involving a subject designated only as ET-447, a subject who bore a striking resemblance to both Edward Torrance and the unidentified passenger from Flight 447. ET-447, the logs revealed, was not just a subject. He was Edward Torrance. Or rather, a version of Edward Torrance plucked from a different point in time and brought to the facility to be studied, experimented on, and ultimately exploited. The investigators, piecing together the fragmented evidence, began to understand the true horror of Project Looking Glass. Torrance, his brilliance twisted by those who sought to weaponize time itself, had become a pawn in a game far beyond his comprehension. Driven to the edge of sanity by the experiments, subjected to temporal manipulations that shattered his mind and body, Torrance had become something more than human, something both powerful and deeply unstable. The logs hinted at his growing ability to control time, to bend it to his will, and at his growing desperation to escape the clutches of his captors. The truth, like shards of a shattered mirror, reflected a reality both terrifying and exhilarating. Edward Torrance, the vanished scientist, the extra passenger, was a chrononaut, a traveler lost in the corridors of time. He was a living paradox, a being out of sync with the natural order. But he was not alone. The investigators studying the evidence realized with growing horror that Torrance's manipulations had created ripples in the temporal stream. Ripples that threatened to unravel the delicate tapestry of past, present, and future. Reports of temporal anomalies began to surface around the globe. People claiming to have lost time, to have experienced events out of sequence, to have encountered strangers who seemed eerily familiar. The world, once oblivious to the dangers lurking beneath the surface of reality, was waking up to the nightmare that Torrance had unleashed. The investigators, now racing against time itself, faced an impossible choice. stop Torrance and risk further damage to the temporal continuum, or allow him to continue his chaotic journey and watch as the world they knew unraveled around them. The fate of time, it seemed, hung precariously in the balance. Reports poured in from every corner of the globe. Strange occurrences, unexplained phenomena. The world, it seemed, was coming unhinged. Like a fabric torn at the seams, reality itself was fraying. Time, once a constant, became fluid. Clocks spun wildly, their hands dancing to a discordant rhythm. Days bled into nights, minutes stretched into hours, and the past whispered through the cracks of the present. The delicate balance of time, disrupted by Torrance's chronal wake, was collapsing. People reported missing time, hours vanishing without a trace, only to reappear with no memory of where they'd been or what they'd done. Others claimed to have glimpsed events out of sequence as if their lives were playing on fast-forward or rewind. The boundaries between past, present, and future blurred, leaving a collective sense of disorientation and dread. The investigators monitoring the growing chaos felt a chill grip their hearts. Torrance, whether by design or accident, had unleashed a force beyond their control. A force that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their reality. The world was on the brink of a temporal meltdown, and they were powerless to stop it. The investigators, their minds strained by fatigue and fear, began experiencing strange phenomena of their own. Visions, fleeting and fragmented, flickered at the edges of their awareness. Images from different times, different places, superimposed upon their reality. Faces from the past, both familiar and unknown, stared back at them from reflective surfaces, their expressions filled with a mixture of warning and despair. Voices, whispers carried on the wind, seemed to speak their names, urging them to turn back, to abandon their pursuit of Torrance. The line between sanity and madness blurred. Were these visions merely hallucinations brought on by stress and exhaustion? Or were they glimpses into the fractured timeline, messages from a reality on the verge of collapse? The investigators, their grip on reality weakening, were forced to confront the possibility that they were no longer just observers in this unfolding temporal crisis, but participants caught in its terrifying embrace. The visions intensified, growing more vivid, more disturbing. They saw glimpses of a future consumed by temporal chaos, where the past, present, and future collided in a cacophony of shattered moments. A world where time itself had become the enemy. The investigators, their minds teetering on the precipice of madness, knew they had to act fast before the visions became their reality. The visions, once fragmented and fleeting, coalesced into a singular, terrifying message. He is coming. 2 words, whispered in the dead of night, echoing in the silence of their thoughts, a chilling premonition of an impending reckoning. The investigators, their hearts pounding in their chests, understood. Torrance was not just escaping, he was gathering power, preparing for something. The warnings came from everywhere and nowhere, scrawled on walls in a language they couldn't decipher, yet instinctively understood, whispered by strangers who would disappear as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind only a sense of unease and the lingering scent of ozone. The investigators, once skeptical, now accepted the impossible. They were caught in a web of temporal manipulation, and the spider was about to make its move. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that set their teeth on edge. Time itself seemed to hold its breath, bracing for the arrival of something monstrous, something beyond human comprehension. The investigators, armed with their wits and a growing sense of dread, prepared to face the storm, knowing that the fate of time and perhaps their very existence hung precariously in the balance. The warnings were a prelude to a storm, a gathering darkness that promised to consume everything in its path. The investigators, once driven by a thirst for answers, now found themselves consumed by a single, desperate hope. Survival. Time twisted around them, folding in on itself like a dying star. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and anticipation. The world held its breath. This was it, the convergence, the moment when past, present, and future collided in a chaotic symphony of temporal displacement. And then, he appeared. Not as the young, ambitious scientist, nor the haunted subject of experimentation, but as something else entirely. Older, his features etched with the passage of not just years but eons. His eyes, once filled with a thirst for knowledge, now burned with an alien light, reflecting the chaos he had unleashed. This was Edward Torrance, transformed, transcended, transfigured by his journey through the labyrinth of time. He moved with an unnerving grace, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. Around him, reality shimmered and warped, unable to contain his newfound power. He spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of existence, and the investigators felt their bones vibrate in response. "You sought to understand time," he said, his words echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "Now, time will understand you." The investigators, their hearts pounding in their chests, knew this was not a threat, it was a promise. The investigators realized their investigation had led them not to a man, but to a force of nature. Torrance was no longer bound by his former self. He was an entity woven from the essence of time. He radiated raw, untamed energy, bending light and distorting sound. The investigators felt an irresistible pull, aligning with his will. Fear surged through them, yet they couldn't look away. In his presence, they were reminded of their own insignificance. They had awakened something ancient and powerful. The entity seemed to judge their actions. The investigators could only watch, wait, and pray. They knew resistance was futile. They were but leaves caught in the tempest. The air crackled with energy, a silent storm brewing around the transformed Edward Torrance. He stood, no longer a man bound by flesh and bone, but a conduit of temporal forces beyond human comprehension. His eyes, windows into a soul touched by the infinite, held the investigators in their unwavering gaze. "You have tampered with forces beyond your understanding," his voice, resonating with the weight of eons, sent shivers down their spines. "And now, you will face the consequences." The investigators, their faces pale with a terror that transcended mere fear, understood. This was not a trial. This was a reckoning. Around them the world twisted and contorted, a canvas of reality warped by Torrance's chronal power. The ground beneath their feet rumbled, threatening to split open and swallow them whole. The sky above, once a comforting blue, churned with swirling vortexes of time and energy, each one a portal into a different moment, a different possibility. The investigators, their senses overwhelmed, stumbled back, their instincts screaming at them to flee, to escape the wrath of this chronal entity. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They were trapped in the epicenter of a temporal storm, at the mercy of a being who held the very fabric of their existence in his hands. A flicker of something akin to amusement or perhaps pity crossed Torrance's ancient features. "You sought answers," he said, his voice echoing with the weight of countless timelines witnessed and manipulated. "But are you prepared for the truth?" He extended a hand, his fingertips crackling with temporal energy. "Choose, embrace oblivion, or face the harrowing reality of your existence." The investigators exchanged glances, their minds reeling. Oblivion offered a tempting escape from the terror that gripped them, but a flicker of curiosity held them back. One by one, their gazes returned to Torrance. A low hum filled the air as Torrance lowered his hand. "So be it," he said, acknowledging their choice. "But be warned, the truth is a double-edged sword. It can illuminate, but it can also shatter." The world around them dissolved into a blinding white void. Time ceased to exist, or perhaps it simply lost all meaning. The investigators, their senses overwhelmed by a torrent of information, found themselves bombarded with visions, memories, possibilities, all blending together in a chaotic kaleidoscope of experience. They saw the birth of stars and the collapse of galaxies, the rise and fall of civilizations, the triumphs and follies of humanity played out across the tapestry of time. They witnessed their own lives not as linear narratives but as intricate tapestries of choices made and paths not taken, each decision creating a ripple effect that echoed through the corridors of their existence. And then, the most unsettling revelation of all. They saw themselves not as individuals but as fragments of a larger consciousness, interconnected across time and space. Their lives, their choices, their very beings, intertwined with countless others in a grand cosmic dance of existence. The truth, as Torrance had warned, was both exhilarating and terrifying. It shattered their perception of reality, stripping away the illusion of individuality and revealing the interconnected nature of all things. It was a truth that could set them free or drive them mad. The blinding white void receded, replaced by the familiar surroundings of the crash site. The wreckage of Flight 447 lay scattered before them, a grim reminder of the tragedy. The air hummed with a residual energy, a faint echo of the temporal storm. And standing among the debris, a solitary figure. Edward Torrance, no longer the chronal entity, but a man once more, turned to face them. He appeared weary, his shoulders slumped with a burden that transcended mere years. "You sought the final passenger," he said, his voice raspy. "But the truth is, you were searching for yourselves." With a sigh, Torrance turned and began to walk away, his form shimmering, fading. "Remember this." His voice, faint now, echoed in the air as the investigators watched him go. And then, he was gone, leaving the investigators to ponder the truth of his words and the harrowing mystery of the final passenger.